Hey there, this is Tatiana Tsoir back at doing the geeky tax stuff. So this session is to cover things regarding the PPP forgiveness. As of today, May 1st, 2020, a little disclaimer that information in this presentation should not be construed as legal or tax advice. Please consult your tax advisor for how this applies to you, okay? So I've assembled this Excel sheet. It's a Google sheet that I will post a link for below this video that you can make a copy of. So the sharing properties are that you cannot use it as is. You will have to create a copy or download it for yourself, and then you can use it. I just want to go over a couple of things that are relevant and why it's important. So recently I've been seeing clients and people I know getting the PPP loan proceeds. So we need to kind of set ourselves up for success in a sense that we need to make sure that we do everything, all the paperwork and etc., so that we're actually eligible for forgiveness and can track how much can be forgiven and what records for which week and etc. we need to collect later on. Okay, so this is as of today, May 1st, 2020. So if there's new guidance issued after this date, then some of this information may not be relevant anymore, but this is, again, my opinion and should not be construed as legal tax advice. Okay, so there will be kind of asterisks at the end of the sheet that I encourage you to take a look at. That's why I put this warning here at the top. But I do want to go over and cover kind of a little bit of what that means and how you can use it. So when you receive the PPP loan, you will enter the amount received here. I also suggest entering the date in this box. Instead of the word example, take that out and put the date of the loan. And then this week, I would also change those dates to the week from and to, and kind of so on for the rest of the 8-week period. The formulas are now set up to do the calculation for you to keep the running balance of how much of that loan you've already utilized. I do recommend to my clients to set up a new bank account or use, let's say, a savings account that they not really use and not underutilize, to keep that money and reimburse themselves from this account to their main account based on these numbers. So for example, employer taxes are not eligible for forgiveness, so I actually made this bright in red so that you can pay attention to it. So net payroll plus employee taxes equals gross payroll, essentially. So both of those are, as of today, as of right now, looks like are forgivable. The employer taxes are not. So your share of the FICA plus the unemployment, federal and state, are not forgivable. So you would enter this amount here so it doesn't really play out in the calculation. So you would just, like I said, start with week 1 or whatever that week is to from and to. Enter payments that you've made. Let's say you ran payroll, and remember there is a cap of pro rata per person of 100,000 gross wages per year. So that comes out to about 8,100 or so. Just divide 100,000 by 52 and you'll get the weekly limit. And so if someone is getting more than that, then you would need to enter the overage into the non-forgivable amount. So you would have to determine that. Again, your bookkeeper or accountant or tax advisor or just a business advisor should be able to help you with that, but with that calculation. But it's actually not a complicated calculation, so I encourage you to take a look into that if someone's making over 100,000, but you're still paying them a full salary. So you are getting a deduction you would be getting a deduction for a full salary. However, only up to 100,000 could be per year. Prorated would be subject to forgiveness. So we just have to keep that in mind. Rent and lease relates to the rental I don't know as of today whether or not leased computer equipment or anything like that is allowed. Just from what I understand, the regular rent, so your building landlord, whatever. But if you have significant lease payments otherwise, I would investigate that if I were you. Utilities, and both the utilities and the rent applies to business property. I generally wouldn't pay personal rent and personal utilities out of that yet. And same thing with the mortgage interest expense. If you're a landlord, you own a building or half a building or whatever it is, you pay mortgage on that. The interest on that mortgage is part of the forgiveness calculation. Okay, so don't count the principal payments, but do count mortgage interest. Okay, so as you move along, kind of, I've given you about 5 or 6 lines for each week. You may or may not use all of them, and you can delete the ones that you don't use, but then just remember to check the formulas. So all of these numbers have formulas and relate to one cell or the other. And then every week you will see the balance and of that loan used up by the qualifying expenses. Okay. Now, then I've also created a calculation here, and right now it says, gives you this error, but the reason is that because right now it's dividing by 0, because that's the cell. And once you have the numbers here, these cells obviously will also have numbers, so this will disappear and the calculation will actually be correct. Now, so this is for you to just check the ratio. Remember, there was a provision about non-payroll costs, so all of these not being more than 25%, that's where you would check that. I don't know how the banks will handle if it's over the 25%, but this is for you to know so that you will know to find out. Also, your EIDL grant. So if you've gotten your couple of thousand or up to 10,000 grant from the SBA, which came out like about last week or so, your forgiveness is reduced by that. So in this formula, I basically took the forgivable amount, the total, given that you pass this check, subtract the EIDL grant, and that will be your forgiveness. What's not forgiven turns into a loan, 1% over 2 years with a 6-year, with the 6-month payment delay or whatever. You don't have to make a payment for 6 months, which is still a pretty good deal, I think. So just remember this, and also check the ratios. Now, another tab in this Excel is, or Google Sheet, is the EIDL grant tracker. You have to know that you may not use the proceeds from this grant to pay for the same expenses. So I would suggest utilizing another account, or this table actually will help you keep track of the expenses that get covered by this grant. Now, you most likely will have other expenses for your business, correct? So think about your phone, your computer, your Zoom costs, and etc. All of those you can use this grant for, and I would put in a date when it was paid. And maybe even here, I would even say if you have several accounts and or credit cards for the business, I would even indicate which method of payment was used, so that when or if the SBA or the bank asks you for some sort of proof, it's easy for you to locate all of those. Okay, so you can use that. And 3 housekeeping, I made a mistake here. I'll fix that. So 3 housekeeping things here that I wanted to mention. I do recommend creating, from a bookkeeping and accounting perspective, I do recommend creating, remember I mentioned this in one of my videos, a block of accounts at the bottom, and the type of account would be other expense and also other income. And basically what I would do is I would create an account for PPP related expenses, and then you would have sub-accounts. So PPP net wages, PPP employee taxes, PPP employer taxes, so that you cannot have that forgiven. However, there is a reason for keeping it separate. And PPP rent, and so on, so that it doesn't interfere with your normal flow of the business. But as soon as this 8-week period is over, we can go back, and your accountant or you can go back and kind of allocate those expenses correctly so that you can easily find the weeks and the times and the amounts that are subject to forgiveness, and then locate the paperwork and so on. There's also another reason for that. And the reason is that according to the newest Treasury regulation, which was expected, so it's not a surprise, we knew that the loan proceeds, forgiven loan proceeds, will not be taxable as income, so they are excluded from income. However, the expenses that forgiven amount is covering, you cannot deduct from your taxes, so from your income on your tax return. That's a very important point, and you have to figure out the amount that's not going to be deductible. So I'll give you an example. So remember I said set up those sub-accounts for PPP net wages, PPP employee taxes, PPP employer taxes, right? So the PPP net wages and the employee taxes, you will not be able to deduct if those amounts are forgiven. However, employer taxes you will be able to deduct because those amounts will not be forgiven, but it's still an expense. I hope that makes sense. In any case, that's something that you have to keep in mind and make sure that your accountant or bookkeeper does that for you. And it's my job to let you know what the rules are. So you can find this regulation here. I will post the link to this document below this video. And you can copy paste all of these links and look up the actual guidance, which is where I got this information from. The last thing that I wanted to cover, those of you who are self-employed, it just came up in the conversation today with a couple of other professionals that I work with. If you are self-employed and you applied for the PPP loan based on your 2019 net Schedule C, so Schedule C is a schedule within your personal tax return, then you would divide that net number by 12 times 2.5. That's your maximum loan, right? Now, what the Treasury is saying is that your forgiveness will be limited to that 8/52 of 2019 number. So even if you're making more this year, or even if you're giving yourself a raise, so to speak, you may find yourself having a remainder of the loan being non-forgivable. Like I said, it still may be a good deal for you. 1% for 2 years, it may be a pretty good deal. But just keep that in mind, that let's say we just ran a scenario where someone was making $80,000 on net Schedule C last year. That would result in about $16,000 worth of PPP maximum amount. But if we take the 8 weeks out of that, it comes out to about $12,000 or 12 and change. So that means that $4,000 will remain as a loan. You can probably pay it back or right away, or pay it back later when you get the paperwork on the loan and start making payments, okay? Keep that in mind, and download the sheet and use it so that you can keep track of it, and I hope that's helpful. Have a great day, and bye for now.